Okay, so croeso, very good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome. Lovely to see so many of you here this afternoon. Following on from the ongoing success of our post-16 leadership program, which I know many of you have already completed, one of the key things you asked us for was to continue to provide a network to share practice and for keeping up to date with post-16 developments. Therefore, this workshop is a series of other sessions, professional learning post-16 sessions, which will be delivered either by one of the post-16 cross-regional consortia team or one of our external partners in response to that request, and around topics and themes which are very post-16 relevant. So I'm joined here today by regional post-16 leads from across Wales, so a huge hello to them, and I know that you'll meet them as we work our way through all the various workshops, and I know that regionally you will already know them. But today it will be myself as post-16 for EAS and my colleague Sarah Sutton from GWER who will be delivering this workshop. So Sarah, would you like to say a quick hello as I can see you on screen?
Yep, hi there everybody. I hope you're having a great afternoon. It's not really snowy here in Colwyn Bay. And I'm not sure how long I'll stay relaxed and peaceful when I start my section on Eston, because that's normally a fairly good way of introducing some rain to a conversation. But it's great to be here this afternoon and looking forward to working with you. Thanks, Sean.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Thank you. Claire, if you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide. Okay, so this workshop is two halves. We're going to look at learner voice, why it's important in the context of post-16 education, and as Sarah has already said, we're also looking at some key priorities relevant to post-16 around Eston. Okay, learner voice, why is it important in the context of post-16? 5 minutes to consider. Please can you post as a little opener your views in the chat? One words, couple of words. Why is it important to do learner voice in post-16? What is its use and impact? Okay, 5 minutes, please post away in the chat if you wouldn't mind. Who's going to start the ball rolling? Let's see who comes up with something in the chat. There's no right or wrong answer. You know, thanks, Sam. Thanks for kicking us off. Understand students' experiences. If anything needs to change, absolutely. Quality assurance. Yeah, the quality assurance process. They're all coming in thick and fast now. Thank you so much. Understanding students' experiences. If anything needs to change. Yeah, absolutely. Pupils have a sense of ownership. Yes, I would agree with that. Feel that they're being listened to. Yes, as in any, environment where you have key stakeholders, customers, in this case, our pupils, our learners, that they absolutely feel as if they're being listened to. Jan says, because we use it to work effectively with our learners as we want them to be resilient and independent. Yeah, absolutely. In the, the big wide world, when they are in employment, when they're in higher education, that is a critical factor, building resilience, building that independence, building that confidence. Yes, absolutely agree. Colleagues, sorry, I don't know everybody's name on the list, but colleagues from Scarborough Pedder, activity services provided are seen as beneficial by the learner themselves. Yes. And we've got Sarah, thank you. Sixth formers have very often been at school since year 7. They've got a great insight into the school, its provision. Absolutely. Any progress or any journey that a school is on, you need to take the learners and the pupils with you, because that's absolutely pivotal. They are the as I said before, they are the key stakeholders in any school environment. Identifying attitudes towards and misconceptions of learning and demands of qualifications. Yes, especially now, Curriculum for Wales, huge, pivotal moment in the education system in Wales. I would absolutely agree. We do need to engage with learners around Curriculum for Wales, or, the curriculum post-16 and what happens next. And as Owen has put there, builds key communication skills in learners. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for that. Loads of ideas there, all of which are absolutely valid reasons that we need to do learner voice in the context of post-16. So thank you very much, colleagues. Claire, if you wouldn't mind taking us to the next slide. Okay. So here's some of the theory around learner voice. And you've already mentioned this, it promotes inclusive practices. It ensures that all learners, regardless of their background or ability, have an equal opportunity to participate in pupil voice initiatives. Yeah, absolutely. In terms of feeling that sense of ownership, feeling that sense of belonging, and includes, you've got that equity of voice, that equality of voice in terms of learners being able to participate, wherever their starting point is, wherever they are in terms of their school life. The second bullet point there, it will contribute in terms of developing leadership skills of learners, and it will empower students to take an active role in shaping their learning and school life experiences. Just holding those 2 points there, and that second one in particular develops leadership skills, empowers our students, our learners, to take an active role in shaping their learning. Can you pop into the chat in terms of sharing some examples? What have you used learner voice for and why? Okay, so let's have a few minutes just to consider that. If you wouldn't mind popping in the chat. If you don't have any examples that spring to mind, don't worry. But if there's anything that stands out for you in terms of what you've already done in school, if you wouldn't mind popping that into the chat. Let's give another little 5 minutes towards that. Lovely, thank you. Some lovely ideas coming through now. It enables post-16 leaders, thank you, Owen, enables post-16 leaders to evaluate provision from a student perspective. Yeah, absolutely. I think in particular where you're developing provision and curriculum or considering your new aspects. The needs of non-statutory learners are radically different to pre-16. Yeah, I agree, absolutely. Thank you, colleagues from Denby High School. Yeah, because, again, going back to Curriculum for Wales, we know it's 3 to 16, but what happens next? What's the continuation of that journey? And I think certainly those learners going into post-16 education and further education, where further education has never been exposed to the experiences of a changing curriculum and pre-16. Charlotte, thank you, allows us to tailor provision to their wants and needs, to make improvements. Sixth formers have very often been at the school since year 7. I think I've rushed backwards of these. Yeah, mainly subject-based. How are things going? But also sixth form experiences. Yeah, absolutely. And that's something we talked about fairly extensively in the post-16 leadership program in terms of creating that vision for your sixth form. Running LGBTQ plus and support groups. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. We are starting after school sessions in the gym for sixth form as a result of pupil voice. Excellent. Okay, thank you for that. That's a nice little example. You said, we did. Again, that's just one reason really to do learner voice. Subject options to tailor the curricular provision. Thank you. Yeah, definitely. Policy changes, developments as in use of study areas. To gather feedback from pupils about the transition from year 11 to 12, we then introduced the VESTA programme. Thank you, Kerry. Thank you for volunteering that as a good example. Yeah, why not? You know, absolutely. Identifying key skills that learners need to make that effective transition. Yeah, and Sixth Form has been a great source of support to our younger learners. Okay, thank you, colleagues. Loads of examples there where you've clearly, you know, taken the ball by the horns. I mean, my view is, you know, that you can't do enough learner voice, you know, and if Claire, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. And these are things you picked up in your feedback in the chat, so thank you, colleagues. But just to reiterate the importance of learner voice, it supports your school development plan or your sixth form development plan, or, you know, as practitioners in particular curriculum areas, it would support that as well. So it supports your priorities by gaining the views of learners, you know, and most priorities you can gain views on, and being all inclusive in terms of letting learners know what the priorities are, whether it's sixth form related or whole school. It aids development of the curriculum and provision, and colleagues have mentioned that several times in the chat. Yes, it does. You know, I recently did a piece of work in some local authorities in the summer term, and in some schools that came out strongly, as in the school asked me how I like to learn and what I wanted to learn in this subject. It came about also in some instances that two different curriculum areas were doing the same subject, you know, whether it was a sort of history, geography, doing a piece of work around war or some conflict, and learners actually fed back, could we just do that subject in that curriculum area, and can we do something completely different in that subject area? And that really helped teachers to, you know, better reconcile their schemes of work. So it is important, you know, curriculum provision, not just the what, but the how, the when, the where. Again, another example is around, I know, you know, certain aspects of RSE or the health and wellbeing curriculum, asking them who they wanted to teach a particular subject. So it's got a lot to give in terms of learner voice around provision and curriculum. You already mentioned there about, it was about, you know, after school clubs, resolves issues just in time. By just in time, what we mean by that is emerging concerns, issues, whether it's around behaviour, whether it's around facilities and opportunities in school. So critical, you know, for you to, you know, as leaders in post-16 education, keeping your ear to the ground. If there are some rumblings, some issues that you could make, you have the opportunity to nip in the bud through, you know, bringing learners together to have that discussion. And also analyses progress over time. Kerry mentioned that about introducing the VESPA programme. You know, we know that the VESPA will gauge progress over time, but also by doing learner voice, similar, you know, you gave us a solution to an aspect that we're looking to improve in school. Thank you very much. We're going to come back to you in 3 or 4 months' time to ask you how things have progressed. Too often schools may do a learner voice, take the feedback, do an initiative, but it's really important to go back to that learner voice group and say, you said, we did, so how is it going now? Is it what you expected, or do we need to make any further refinements or adjustments, for example, in that capacity? So hope you found that particular section useful, the reasons why, and it will enable you to consider what else you could do in the capacity of learner voice. Claire, if you wouldn't mind just moving on the slide to the next one, please. Okay, in terms of how you undertake learner voice, surveys, yes, absolutely, surveys are a possibility. And I'm going to ask in a minute which surveys that colleagues use, if any. Small groups of learners, again, depending on what it is you're trying to achieve, you may determine, what type of learner voice will take place. And that can either be bespoke, small groups pulling learners together, it could be one-to-ones, through classroom pedagogy. By that we mean as part of the, and I know that someone mentioned that earlier in the chat about the quality assurance process, about the book looks, the learning walks, sitting with learners and their books and their pieces of work to talk through, as a feature of gaining knowledge and understanding of progress in learning. So that's what we mean by that learner voice applied to classroom pedagogy. And again, as leaders of post-16 in your schools, this is something that you'll be working with colleagues across the school on. Or if not, maybe this is a pivotal moment to ask that question: can I be involved? In terms of gauging that progress, working on some one-to-one experiences with learners and gaining that knowledge around their own individual journeys. I've put there, if anybody wants to share examples that have made any positive impact, where you've, again, you've provided already some examples, but is there anything else that springs to mind where you feel that learner voice has had a positive impact at all? Jeanette, thank you. Through prefect team and school leadership teams. Okay, thank you very much. That's another example of the where and the how that learner voice takes place. Prefect team, school leadership team, absolutely. Yeah, the school leadership team and all the subgroups that filter off for it will be, for want of a better word, ready-made learner voice opportunities. I agree. I suppose indirectly, intervention activities as well that are taking place will feature as part of learner voice. Thanks, Sam. Pastoral time and mentors. Yeah, absolutely. Impact on school decisions in a variety of areas. School council, in-house Senedd. Thank you, Isabella. Yeah. Again, another already, established groups of cohorts of learners. Okay. Surveys. What surveys are colleagues using? What are you using? If indeed you do, surveys. Are they bespoke to your school? Are they off-the-shelf surveys? What sort of surveys are you using and why? Google Forms, thanks, Johnny. Google Forms mostly, so that I assume that's bespoke to need. Too many though. Yeah. Microsoft Forms. Yeah, forms. Are these all forms that you bespoke to your school? Owen, you've put the PASS survey there. Johnny, also the Shern survey. My next slide will I'll unpack that in a little while in terms of what they are. I'm not sure if everybody knows what the Shern and what the PASS surveys are. What, in terms of those of you who've put the word forms, what sort of forms are they? What are the questions on those forms? If you wouldn't mind enlightening us. Colleagues, please, if it's easier for you to unmic yourself and speak, please do. We would very much welcome to hear your voice. Thanks, Kerry. So based on ESTIM pupil questionnaire or any new initiative we introduced as a school. Okay, so you're creating questions that are bespoke to need. Likert scale, very good. Okay, Owen, what sort of things have you used the Likert scale for?
Just for sort of the effectiveness of provision, it may be, or we did a load of one-to-one interviews before the A2 exam. So we did one-to-one interviews with form tutors, and we collapsed the PSE's timetable at Easter. And we just wanted to know. Essentially, I wanted to get back up from the kids that this was something that had proven to be effective from them, or otherwise, and find out that it hadn't been effective. And it was sticking your neck out a little bit for that. So so it was very, very simple. Did you find your one-to-one interview with a form tutor, or did it help you to revise effectively? Then you got the decrease instead.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Owen. Thank you ever so much, because you made a valid point there in terms of, learner voicing is important to get the good news and we may need to respond and adjust and tweak and make improvements. It's that old adage of if you don't ask, you don't get. So you really do need to undertake learner voice with stealth. Be confident of the reasons why you're doing and what it is that you want to hear. So thank you for that. For those of you who are not aware of the surveys that colleagues have mentioned, so we've got there mentioned the SHRN survey, so that's the School Health Research Network, and this tends to be whole cohorts of learners who are surveyed. It captures key health and wellbeing metrics, and these metrics are referenced across about 30 national policies and strategies, including whole school approach to mental health and wellbeing policy, and ESTIM's Healthy and Happy report, and that was published back in 2019. And it absolutely, the point of the survey is it aims to improve young people's health and well-being in Wales. So it enables the school to pick up very clearly any potential issues or areas for development. So a really useful survey. I mean, most schools I know are using SHRN, but if not, I've put the link in the chat for you. Another one is the PASS survey. This is more nuanced towards understanding why learners may be reluctant, disengaged, or even disruptive in terms of exploring social and emotional well-being. And it also provides solutions, interventions, and guidance, so you can start to address some of the issues that may be raised by the results of the survey. So again, another one well worth doing. So I put a link in the chat to the PASS survey for you. And then I know some colleagues mentioned on the chat there about the VESPA Academy. So that's the GCSE A-level mindset publications, resources and tools. They also have a survey which looks at the progress and journey of learners' development in the acronym of the VESPA model. So that's the vision, the effort, the systems, the processes, and the attitudes. So you have the ability to do the survey at the very beginning to understand learners' starting point. The publication and the model allows you then to have access to resources and suggestions on how to improve the skills development needs of learners depending on the results of the initial survey, and then you have opportunity to repeat the survey and look at progress in terms of development. So I've put a link to the Vesper Academy portal and the survey there for you as well. Right, okay, hopefully you found that useful, colleagues. That's the end of my first half session now, and I'm just about to hand over to Sarah. But just to say, you know, in terms of any questions, we might have a couple of minutes at the end if you've got any questions to ask, which we will welcome. But, you know, please do stay in touch if we can support you in any capacity further. And, you know, hopefully we'll see you at our follow-up workshops. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Sarah now. Over to you, Sarah. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sian. Sian, I am absolutely amazed that you kept that to half an hour. Look at the times, 13:29. Absolutely unbelievable. That's quite something. Well done.
Thank you.
Right, thanks very much, and welcome everybody from snowy Colwyn Bay, from peaceful and relaxed Colwyn Bay. So Claire, if you wouldn't mind just moving the slide forward, and I'll give you an overview of what we're going to talk about for the next 20 or 30 minutes. So rapidly moving the weather from snowy to rainy and stormy, which is just an opportunity this afternoon to provide you with some useful updates around Estin, and those Estin updates which are particularly pertinent to post 16. Somebody had already put in the chat, actually, I think it might have been our colleague from Denbigh, saying that you know, post 16 can be you know, a very, very different ball game, can't it? You know, our learners in the sixth form are a very discrete and unique group of learners. They are still obviously covered you know, entirely by the Estin framework. And I think it's really important to keep our sixth form learners front and centre of what we do, just like we would with any of our learners across any other year group. So there are three particular areas that I just want to draw to your attention this afternoon. The first one is on attendance. The second on safeguarding, and then the third is the all-encompassing skills agenda. And really what I want to do is just present you with a series of think points, really. It's not about frightening the life out of anybody. It's not about sort of giving you a huge long list of things to do. It's just about bringing these things to the front of your mind so you can be thinking about them, thinking about what this looks like in your setting, thinking about what it looks like in your sixth form, what it looks like in your sixth form lessons, and what it looks like in your school. And it might be that you need to go back to base or go and have a chat with some people in school and just make sure that you've got all of this in hand. So three main areas for this afternoon, and we'll see how that goes. We're going to have an opportunity for a breakout room, and we're going to do that to discuss some attendance and safeguarding issues. So, you know, that might just be useful to tease out with some colleagues where you're up to with some of these areas. But please do feel free to put questions in the chat or make comments in the chat, and we can just pick those up as we sort of move through the session. Estin traditionally isn't a particularly entertaining source of conversation, is it? So anything we can do to keep it light, really. So we'll have a look to start off with, and we'll have a think about attendance, and then I'm going to link that in with safeguarding at the same time. So let's go with attendance first of all. Attendance is a really, really tricky area, isn't it? Okay, it's a real hornet's nest at the moment. And I think it's fair to say that many schools have absolutely not yet returned to their pre-pandemic levels. Now, what is clear is that Estin have resumed their commentary on attendance. And inspectors will report on what they call notable features around attendance. So that could be to do with learners in receipt of a free meal. It could be to do with persistent absenteeism. Or it could be to do with a particular year group. So if you're in a position where, you know, your statutory level attendance is really strong, so year 7 to 11 is strong, But, you know, if you're looking at the sixth form, if your sixth form attendance has absolutely plummeted and you sort of, you know, between 70 and 80%, that would be reported as a notable exception. So I think my first point to you, or my first thing that I would like you to take away with you, is please do make sure that your systems and processes for attendance in the sixth form are just as rigorous as they are for your pre-16 learners, okay? They're part of your setting, they're part of your provision. The funding stream is different, but they're part, you know, you receive money for learners. So do make sure that all of those robust systems and processes that you've got in place for pre-16 learners, make sure that you've got them for post-16 learners to avoid that being reported on as a notable exception. So that's just something to consider with attendance. Attendance in general, if you have a look at the attendance stats, if you have a look at the national stats, you will see that attendance in the sixth form is generally the lowest in the school. Okay, and there could be a whole host of reasons for that. And I think it's wise to make sure that you reference that in your school self-evaluation, you've referenced that in your sixth form self-evaluation. So that's something that you're aware of, that's something that you're monitoring, and it's something that you're tracking as well. Now, the other thing I want to mention to you is around safeguarding. Okay, so I just want to talk to you a little bit about safeguarding. You'll see the link between the two, and then we're going to have an opportunity to go into some breakout rooms and to discuss some of those areas. So in terms of safeguarding then, arrangements for safeguarding from ESTIN are at the absolute heart of every single ESTIN inspection that takes place. I'm sure many of you on this call now will have been part of an ESTIN inspection. Your school may have just gone through an ESTIN inspection, and you will know that safeguarding is front and centre, again, of the ESTIN processes. This really applies, of course, to all year groups, and that includes the sixth form. We've seen already the fact that learner voice is absolutely essential in the sixth form. It's absolutely essential to keep on talking to our learners and getting feedback from them post-16. And that applies to safeguarding as well. So again, my first point around safeguarding to you is to please make sure that your safeguarding SER, and whether it's your designated safeguarding lead that does that, or whether it's the head that does that, make sure that your safeguarding SER is up to date, and please do not in any shape or form disregard your sixth form learners. ESTIN, during the course of an inspection, will check your record keeping, they'll check your reporting processes, they'll check whether you as a school are using data and information to inform your self-evaluation and make changes to provision. So in other words, make sure that, again, sixth form safeguarding has got the same high level of priority as your pre-16 processes. Now, one area of note that I would suggest that you perhaps give some consideration to, and it's linking back to attendance now, is for you to consider your on-site, off-site arrangements. Now, what I mean by that is frequently schools will allow sixth form learners to have more autonomy. They might be signing out during non-contact times. They might be leaving school early. They might be arriving to school late because of hybrid timetables and so on. Do give that some serious thought about how you manage that in terms of attendance and how you manage it in terms of safeguarding as well. So do you have robust arrangements for sixth formers coming onto the site and leaving the site? Do you take registers for sixth form lessons? So do you know where a sixth former is at any given point in time? Do you cover lessons for sixth formers? Or if you've got an absent staff member, does that class remain unsupervised? How do you know where they are? Do you have processes for reporting missing learners at all year groups? Again, not just pre-16, have you got them for post-16 as well? Are post-16 pupils supervised when they're not in a lesson or when they're in a free period? How do you manage the work setting for that? Do you set work for them online during Teams or Google Classroom? Or doesn't that happen? Do you assess the work? Do you return it? What are your processes? So there's quite a lot to think about. And what I would like you to do is I want you to spend a little bit of time in the breakout room now and consider those two areas. Okay, so I've just thrown a load of prompts at you, a load of sort of things to consider. But what I would like you to concentrate on, what I'd like you to give some thought to, is what are the implications around post-16 attendance or non-attendance? How are you managing that? What does that look like in your setting? And bearing in mind, of course, that every school is different. Every school's got a different set of processes and a different context. And I'd also like you to have a conversation with your breakout group around the safeguarding implications for our sixth formers as well. And just thinking, are we keeping them safe? Is there any more that we can do? Is there a change to our provision that needs to happen? So have a chat about that with your group. Claire will organise you into groups. Claire, if you wouldn't mind just leaving perhaps Sian and I out of those groups, that might be helpful. But if you have a chat with your group, perhaps put together 5 or 6 bullet points, and in my best teacher style, be ready to report back with your thoughts on those discussion items. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Have a think, have a chat, get together a few bullet points, and then we'll come back together in 10 minutes. Okay, thanks very much, Claire. Okay, hopefully you've managed to gather a few points together. Would anybody like to go just an unmic and just offer any thoughts, any feedback? Quite happy for you to do that. Anybody want to come in first? Or I might have to pick somebody, which would be awful.
We just talked about sixth form having lanyards for us as a big way to overcome a lot of it. Not just safeguarding in, I think, the respect that we think there, but also in terms of like fire safety. So because our school setting is that it's in a community, it's nestled between loads of housing estates, it's not far from co-op. You know, we do let students go on and off site at their leisure, you know, during their free time and that. But having the lanyards has been a really good way to just keep a track of who's in and who's out. And when we do fire drill next week, that's going to be a big thing for me, is looking at who's correctly signing in and out, challenging the ones who perhaps haven't done that correctly. But the second part of it as well is because our sixth form get to wear their own clothes around the school, they do have to wear the lanyards as well, so that they are identified as being members of the school community, you know, to sort of protect us against potential intruders without permission, you know, kind of thing. So that's just a big thing of how we've used lanyards to sort of safeguard them and the rest of the school community.
How do you use
great,
that
yeah.
then? Sorry, asking the question, how do you ensure they do it? Because we had a fingerprinting system and the kids just wouldn't use it. You know, they've been more effective at actually writing down the times they're in and out than actually using the fingerprint system.
So we've put it into the sort of student agreement that they sign at the start of year 12. You know, so there's like a load of things that they sign to agree to, but that's one of them. Pushing it in assembly, asking staff to challenge, but you know, like, because it's sixth form as well, it's being delicate with staff, isn't it? And it's saying, no, it's not just about challenging students not wearing lanyards, but you know, just going back to teacher basics and praising the ones that are wearing it, you know, and just saying, oh, such and such, brilliant, you know, you've got your lanyard on. But it does require a whole staff focus, and it does require me to ask staff to participate in enforcing that rule. And in terms of students wearing lanyards, that's something that has changed this year, you know, and it's something we're enforcing a lot more. So it's just the same as anything with standards. It's just making sure the whole staff buy into it and support you with it. And then our reception staff, because students do have to go through the main doors to exit, reception staff will challenge students as well if they're not signing in and out correctly.
We've got an open site, which is trickier then.
Yeah, and it's interesting you should say that, Jeanette, about the is really important, isn't it? It's a great contribution. Thanks, Isabella. It's hard, and isn't it, that you're at, you know, and I think you can see how, you know, how potentially contentious this whole area can be, because you've got issues around lanyards, and like you say, Isabella, you don't want to be creating a confrontation with your learners, do you? It needs to be a whole staff drive. You've got issues with site security and just learners moving around your site, potentially not in uniform. So it really does need some careful planning. So that's great. Top marks from Flintshire there, Isabella. Brilliant. Well done. Any other feedback? Anything of note that anybody would like to share?
I think our group was very much that Sims isn't very helpful for sixth form. It doesn't create those end of percentage results because they don't have a full timetable, and nobody really resolved that other than creating additional spreadsheets and additional work.
We were having a similar discussion. We were having a similar discussion around the sort of the commonality and the consistency of coding for those elected study periods, so that we're not kind of challenged by. I know different authorities might have different views of which code you should use, for example. So I think that was a kind of a discussion point for us as well, around trying to find the balance between the freedoms and the transition between statutory schooling and university, which we're all trying to do, whilst keeping everybody safe and making sure that we keep that like say that coding right, so that if challenged by anybody, it would be important. I know somebody was talking about using a B code, which we've always had contentious issues with historically with lower school learners. So there are kind of, it would be useful to get some sort of resolution around what is it that we do and what is it that we as an authority use. So we all seem to be using different things. So I think that was perhaps an important issue to consider.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And, you know, from my previous incarnation as a head, that's something that we had to work. That was always a challenge, that sort of the consistency or lack thereof between local authorities, especially on these statutory issues around attendance and around use of codes. You know, again, they're difficult issues. And I think what we have to do is to keep bringing it back and saying, do we know where the learners are at any one point in time, and recognising that there are foibles in the systems at the moment. So I completely agree with you. That's really helpful. Thanks very much, everyone. Well, we're hurtling towards the end of the session, but thank you very much for your contributions. So what I'd like to do, just to wrap up, just for these final 5 minutes, if you wouldn't mind just going on to the final slide then, Claire. Oh, there we go. We've done our feedback. Thank you. And the next one. So it's just to wrap this up, and again, thank you very much for engaging. Just the final Estin update really is around skills development, and I think that, you know, this is obviously a huge area of focus pre-16 as you roll out the new curriculum. Cross-curricular skills are the absolute cornerstone of the new curriculum, and I would just urge you to give consideration to how you manage that post-16. There's an awful lot going on with literacy and numeracy in particular at the moment post-16. I'm sure you're all wrestling with the Welsh Baccalaureate and what that means in your setting. You know, we could do a session in its entirety on the Welsh Bac and how we're managing that. But just for you to be aware that the skills focus has stretched over the border to post-16, if you like. It isn't just in the confines of pre-16. So perhaps give some consideration to how you evidence progress in literacy, numeracy, Welsh second language or bilingualism in the sixth form as well. And just some final considerations, if you wouldn't just go on to the last slide, Claire. Just some final considerations, again, final think points for you. Just have a think, you know, very much with your well-being, next steps, UCAS hat on now. What are the skills that are required to move effectively to higher education and employment? Have a really good think about the fact that there's massive demand with literacy and oracy in particular now, but massive literacy demand for a whole variety of A-levels, but increasingly so in the sciences. I'm a chemistry teacher by trade. I've certainly seen that coming through chemistry and definitely biology. And perhaps just have a think about what your approach to the Welsh Bac is. I think if we had a bit more time, we could sort of do some thoughts in the chat, or maybe another breakout, but have a think about the way that you're organising the Welsh Bac. Does the Welsh Bac fit the skills agenda? Does it develop the skills that you want it to? Or is it something that's causing you a problem at the moment and you're just sort of trying not to think about it? But that whole skills agenda, I think my main message to you is don't just park it with pre-16. Keep it over the line as well. Keep it over into the post-16 as well. You're clear on what your provision looks like post-16 and how it's useful for moving learners forward as well. So that is your whistle-stop tour of all the latest ESTIN updates. I hope you found that useful. Things with ESTIN change all the time, don't they? I know that you'll talk to your colleagues, you know, you'll have schools being inspected down the road from you, and they'll give you some feedback, and that might startle you, and then you'll set off on something else. But those, I think, are the main ESTIN points of note: attendance, safeguarding, and skills. So just a few take-home bits and pieces for you to consider as you go about your daily business. Right, Sian, I think we're done, aren't we?
Yeah, lovely. Thank you ever so much, Sarah. Thank you, and lovely to see so many colleagues here. Yeah, I hope that you find that really useful. We will give you access to recording as participants, and also to the presentation. And Emma's just popped a little PS in there in the chat in terms of our next session, which is an update from Welsh Government representatives on the post-16 performance measures for 23-24. Again, as post-16 leads, it's something you need to keep abreast of. So yeah, absolutely lovely to see you. Have a good rest of the afternoon, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you at the next event. Thanks, everyone. Diolch yn fawr iawn. And enjoy your afternoon and evening. Bye-bye.